Okay, so we were reading the sixth letter from Vilna and kind of a description of what was going on. We had talked about that wanted to take this person, Mr. Isser, and publicly shame him, and it sounds like he also that his partner, Mr. Chaim, did recant publicly, and it's also these sort of criticisms of standing on their heads, yelling out in Yiddish during davening, and then it seems also like it's also Mishkan Zachar. There's also an accusation here of sodomy. Okay. Yalzah. And we had ended with the Vilna Gaon said Shemitzvah dof, to run after them, chase them, and to exile them. And afterwards, Yoshvu Haroznim. So he's describing here what happened basically. And afterwards, Yeshvu Haroznim, Gam Shnei Kitos Hadayanim B'Hagona Bezdin. The Batei Din and the leaders and the Bezdin all sat. Vayahefsek, Vayapsak, Lisrof Aktavim Shalahem. The Psak Din, the decision legally, the halakhic decision was to burn these books of the Chasidim. Eitzel Kuna Kodem Habal Shabbos. The the question somebody asked is, these strange practices, is there confirmation or is it just hearsay? So, I mean, I assume that people saw it. I wouldn't assume that it's all rumors. It seems to be taken for granted that maybe they do stand on their head. But now yelling out in Yiddish, in the middle of davening, I mean, Rabbi Nachman writes about that. He's like, you should yell out Tata, you should yell out, I mean, it's not crazy. There's some kind of ecstatic prayer. There's also, in one of the things I came across, there was an accusation of basically what we would call speaking in tongues, that they say things during davening that they don't seem in control of, and, kind of like prophecy. I mean, in fact, Gemara says that was an aspect of prophecy, was sort of speaking in tongues, basically. So that's a good question. Maybe we'll take a look at the letters of Rabbi Shneur Zalman, because he does sort of write letters in defense, and maybe that would tell us something. Do we have? I mean, these are small towns. I assume if they have a minion going, it's hard to imagine they could be an accusation of something, and it'd be wrong. On the other hand, it would be interesting to look at the response of the Chasidim and see, maybe they deny it. Maybe I'm not sure there's really such a problem with, I don't know where it comes from, this idea of standing on your head. And that does sound like something that might be a rumor, in other words, the yelling out in Yiddish is probably true. Certainly the nusach change to nusach hari is true. Then did they sort of throw things in, this sort of mishkav zachar, homosexual sex, or standing on your head, is that stuff that just like, the frenzy produces these crazy things. But where do they get standing on your head from? I mean, first of all, why are they so worried about that? And second of all, where does that come from? Maybe I'll try and see if I can find an answer, because that seems the most sort of random. So then they brought together the Bezdin, and there was a psak to burn everything. Isser Shama, and they do it on right before Kabbalah Shabbos. It sounds like that's when people are around or watching, because I've seen that time specifically targeted. Umar Isser and Mr. Isser, Rosh Ma'asef, the head of the gathering of the Karliner Minyan, Yal B'mal Yona B'Shabbos Kodem Shochanad. He has to go up on the bima before Shochanad. Uv'chol Beis HaKnesses u'Beis HaMedrash lo yeh shum minyan b'kan. Rakia HaKol Beis HaKnesses u'Beis HaMedrash HaGadol. And everybody, there can't be any different minyanim in the city. Everybody has to daven in the big shul. I guess there was a big shul and then there were a little shtiblach or a little minyanim. So everybody has to daven in the big shul. You do see, by the way, that it sounds like people were there by Shochanat. So that's interesting. V'yitvade, right? They're trying to make it as public as they can. Yitvade shama kfi hanusach asher yatsa midazdin, and he has to be mitvade. He has to confess his sins, but not in his own words, in the words that the Beit Din is going to write. I mean, they are really taking these folks to task. Yaharim hashamish otam b'chol hageluyim elav. And then maybe it's Yaharit. Yachtov. Not sure the shamish is supposed to do something. What's this word? Yaharit. Give a test. I'm not sure. V'yichtov l'chol akilas harishait l'kila kedisha shlav, and to Minsk, and then we're going to write a letter to Shlav and to Minsk, Asher Sham Semelakina, Moshe of Semelakina, because over there there's also zealousy, because there are groups of this there. Ani shalech atek michtav kilatenu bechet haroznim agaon hachasid beiskitas danimufuk chachmei hakal. And he says, this is, I guess, the Sofer writing in parentheses. I'm going to send a copy of all these letters, 8 letters, 8 announcements, along with what the Gaon said. Sheyotze Hefsed Almar Isser.
Hapsak din.
Thank you. Sheyotze Psak Din Almar Isser, and when the Psak Din goes out on Mr. Isser, Lo Haya HaChasid B'kan, then we'll have no more, I guess, Chasidim here. Rak Ba'an Tikli Ubiyom Vav Erev Shabbos Kodesh Shalach Achrei Haroznim V'kas Alehem. What's in Tikli? That's another city for near Vilna. So there's another city near Vilna called Tikli. On Friday, Shalach Achrei Roznim B'kas Alehem. We will, I guess, chase them out. Madua Hikilu, or we'll chase them down and say Madua Hikilu Mishpatam Im Haya Lekel Iyadai Hayiti Oselahem Kasher Asa Elai Hanavi L'Nevi Habal. So if this doesn't work, and on Friday they're still gathering, we'll say, why aren't you paying attention to, why are you being lenient about this mishpat, about this psak din? If we were able, if God would give us the ability, we would do to you what Elisha did to Nevi'ei Habal. I think that means kill them. Vaya chafetz hachasid laha'amid l'mar iser b'kuna. And the Vilna Gaon, hachasid, it's so confusing because hachasid means the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon wants to put Mar Isser in a kuna, which is a like a stock pillory. Araka Rosnim lo avuzot. We're not going to do that to all the followers, but the leaders, he wants to put them in stocks. The hikuotam bekintashug, and they want to hit him with it's some kind of strap, or I think it was a rubber thing. B'cheder akal kodem kabbalah Shabbos. They want to do it at the most public time, which is right before Kabbalah Shabbos, when everyone's around. And afterwards, we're going to burn their books, Eitzel Hakuna, next to this stockade. And before Shochenad, they'll have to go on the bima. Chasidim Havrio Amdo Liamino Sitno Bachakacharimoto. And then, so all the Chasidim will be up there with her and with him. And then, I think Rosenman is followers. But I think it comes from the word the wicked. There's a root for it in the Torah, Rosenman. That's too why, but it seems to be the followers. Why is it only Rosenman? And so it sounds like even if they do all this, they're still going to put them in Cherem. Or at least him. They can put the leader in Cherem. Chol HaShavua Yeshev B'Masar. And then the whole week is going to have to be in jail. Beit HaKela. B'Mifsar Shekorin Schloss. In an area that they call the Schloss. Now that is a German word, right? That was used during the Holocaust. And on Fridays, after spending the week in jail, on Friday they can come into I guess it's a big room for the whole congregation. I'm sorry, maybe the Rosenim is the leaders of Vilna. That might be. Raka Rosenim lo avuzah. So maybe before, when the Vilna Gaon said to put him in stocks, the leaders of Vilna did not do it. But instead, that's what it is. The Rosenim is the heads of the city, of some kind of heads of the city. Barons counts. Okay, so it's some kind of city heads, some kind of lay heads of the city, I guess Jewish, or maybe not Jewish. But I guess they didn't want to allow, even though the Gaon had said you have to put him in a stockade, they didn't want to allow that, but they were okay with beating him publicly. So I guess beating publicly was considered less of an issue than a stockade. What's a pillory? Is that same as a stockade? I saw somebody mention pillory.
So these people the religious leaders had the authority to impose such a punishment?
Well, it sounds like, it doesn't sound like entirely that they can do whatever they want, because this is interesting that the Vilna Gaon, who you'd think his word would be law, he said to put him in a stockade, but they didn't end up doing that because the Rosenim, which is either Jewish leaders or non-Jewish leaders, didn't want to do it, but they were okay with beating him. So it sounds like there is a lot of authority that the Beis Din has here. The Psak Din, it sounds like is going to be powerful, but it doesn't seem 100%, because or else you would think that whatever the Gaon said, that's what they would do. So that's interesting. Now we know that at this time, Jewish communities were under the general jurisdiction. Jewish communities were independent, had to collect their own taxes, things like that, and give it to the government. But the government, was on some level in charge of schools and other things. Religion was part of the government. So they may have had some, but it sounds like the Jewish community actually had a lot of independent power. You wouldn't have all these Psak Dins. And it sounds like they had their own jail too. Kasva Rosnim Chassid, and the heads of the Rosnim, this is either non-Jewish, it sounds like Jewish heads, Chasid and the Vilna Gaon, Gaon of Bezdin and the Av Bezdin of Vilna, they write, they're will writer, they wrote L'chol Kilos for all congregate, all city, all places, for all the congregations. Uvikshu mehaorchim shekol echad ve'echad yichtov li'iro l'kililato u'miyuadav u'farsemet ha'chanifim katshel mar iser. And they will write, they're going to write these, I guess, cherems or letters, and that everybody visiting Vilna will take it back with them. Remember, communication wasn't so easy. And, they got to spread the word when they leave Vilna. Whoever's visiting will have to spread for how long it's going to go on. I don't know, but whoever comes to visit Vilna will have to take one of these letters and bring it back to their home city. About this guy, Mr. Isser. Mr. Isser, Hoda b'fnei Bezdin, and what do the letters say? They will say that he admitted before the Bezdin, Shera'a b'kihila kadisha munkach. Uvshari makomos, I think it's munkach, maybe minkach. Uvshari makomos masim mechuarim. And he will admit. So here's how they know, I guess. Now, on the one hand, this is a forced confession. Right? There seems to be a sense that they know about these weird things. On the other hand, this for sure seems like a forced confession. That he will admit before Bezdin that he saw in the city of Minkak, or Shari Makomas, and in other places, I guess, of the Chasidim, Masim Mechuarim, he saw bad things. Bad deeds, disgusting deeds. For Amorei Lav, sheyesh bazeh kavana gedola, and that the Chasidim said that it's actually big kavanas, that these are mystical things and very secret, very foundational. Umar Isser haya chashuv mufursam beinehem, and Mr. Isser is very important in their eyes in this group of Chasidim. And the person who wrote the letter says, I saw all of this with my own eyes. And also the Psak Din said that two Chasidim can't learn together. Right? In other words, they're dividing them because they don't want them to discuss Chasidut, I guess. Adkan Psak Din Bezdin Hatzedek. This is the Psak Din. So all of these things. And the writer, the copier, says, Gam Shamati Alpi Magidei Emes Anshe Lidija Vilna. I also heard from the people in Vilna who tell truth. Shetzakim Betulatam, bye, that, I don't know if this is worse or better, but the Chasidim yell out during their prayers, bye. Amru b'shem Chasid Ha'amiti, Mareneo Eliyahu, that's the Vilna Gaon, we heard in the name of the Vilna Gaon, Shu Yodeya, that he knows Shazek Klipa Gedola. Oh, that this is a klipa, big klipa. What is a klipa? Klipa in Jewish mysticism is like the side of the Satan, the side of wickedness, the side of everything has a light in a vessel and a klipa. And a klipa means a shell, but the shell means like, it's a way of, if something is part of the shell, it's part of gives power to the Satan, to the Yetzer Hara, to the so this is interesting. This is an accusation. This is more than just the doing weird things. This is very reminiscent of what they used to accuse the followers of the Shabtai Tzvi of. For instance, the whole enormous Emden Eibshitz controversy revolved where Rabbi Yaakov Emden accused Rabbi Yochanan Eibshitz, not long before this, only in the 1750s, of being a follower of Shabtai Tzvi. That revolved around amulets that Rabbi Yochanan Eibshitz wrote, and and it was very common to write amulets. The problem wasn't writing amulets. The problem was that when Rabbi Yaakov Emden looked at the amulets, he said these words are Sabbatian words. These words are references that nobody would understand because they're mystical and they're in code, but they're in code and they're Sabbatian references. And that was what launched this a war between the two perhaps greatest rabbis of the generation. And whole books are written, back and forth, and there's a lot of scholarship since then about it. So over here, when he says, the Chasidim, when they're accusing the Chasidim of yelling out "boy," which, what is that? Is that really an issue? So, right, the Vilna Gaon is saying it's not just that they're yelling out in Yiddish, but what they're yelling out is it's nefarious. There's intent here. Something is good. They are working for the devil, basically. That's what it's saying. And this is the key. So I wonder, standing on your head. So first of all, that's a good question. Did anybody see them stand on their head? Because it doesn't sound like something one would do. I don't think there's a Kabbalistic source for that. Maybe there is. Or standing on your head, something, is it a worry? Is this some kind of, I don't know, Shabtai Tzvi things, it's some kind of Kabbalistic thing. Shabtai Tzvi was very Kabbalistic. He used the Kabbalah to do what he did. And the Frankists even more so. So, Kabbalah is, the Ari's Kabbalah is from the 1500s. So this is a couple hundred years after, but this is a little bit different. The accusation of you're using a different nusach, but this is more than that. This is you have bad intent. This isn't just an ecstatic prayer. So that's interesting. I'll try and track down if there's anything we can find out. If there's anything really to this. Okay. Good day.
Okay, thank you.